All right, let's dive into it. Y'all set?
All right. Yep. Oh yeah. Whew.
So we're going to continue on with this amazing conversation that we've been having with our brother Jiulio in this series of Creating New Earth, a collaborative mission. We're excited because Jiulio is about to start his Spirituality 101 course, and we've been diving into this content with him for how long has it been now? A few
Gosh, I
years.
feel like we first came across Julio maybe 3 years ago. I don't know, feels like a lifetime ago, but Julio's been on the show with us several times now, and we love getting his insights. That I just find they're all so timely. Right before we started this interview here, we started off with a prayer because which we've actually been doing more and more now because it sort of sets a space. And I don't know about you guys, but what's the date today? August 24th. We woke up and Tay and I look at each other. We're just kind of like, how are you guys? How are you doing? We both kind of felt like almost ready to like burst into tears, like just heavy. Heavy is a good word for it, and this blah kind of feeling. And
The feeling that I had is almost like my whole body had been almost trampled on within a hard cement. And I was just peeling myself out of bed in the same way that I would peel my body off of that flattened out cement.
and so then we kind of pulled ourselves up to get this to have our conversation with Julia. And just I mean, Julia's like an absolute breath of fresh air, and really helps to put things into perspective. Really is. I mean, you're an absolute blessing to this planet, Julio. So thanks for coming and joining us again for this specific series on creating new earth.
Thank you, Jason and Tia. I love having these conversations with you guys, and yeah, everything does seem timely with us, doesn't it? So happy to be here.
So why don't we start off, because I know I generally find if Tay and I are picking up and feeling something, and most of the time, I mean, we've got a pretty good perspective of where we are, and we can sort of see what's happening and not get pulled into it too much. But then there's some days where it's heavy, and right now, just the degree of just I think the absolute devastation is taking place all over the place. Sometimes it just hits, especially when it ties in back at home. And I've had my own family going through lots of challenges in Kelowna, where all the fires are right at the moment. And I think that was probably tying into stuff. But
What's
Julia,
going on?
maybe pass it back to you. Like, what is going on with this heaviness, this absolute blah feeling, and not wanting to really do much of anything? It's like we were talking earlier. You just feel like you want to stay in bed with the covers over you a little bit. What's going on in the world right now?
So what we need to really become aware of and have some clarity is that on an individual and collective level, people are experiencing ego death. And that ego death comes with a lot of heavy emotions. The other thing I need to really mention and really hit this home is the more you evolve spiritually, the more you become in tune with the collective field. So, a lot of these heavy energies, a lot of these feelings of just giving up, of not doing anything, these feelings of feeling lethargic, of what's the purpose in this? Why should I keep moving forward? A lot of it is we're just picking up other people's fields and energies. So this is what's going on in the collective. There's a lot of uncertainty in the outside world. And what I want to remind everyone is this outside uncertainty is a reminder to go back inside, to come within and come into that space of stillness, which we always find in that present moment, and really try to anchor ourselves as we experience this outside turmoil. The truth of the matter is this, though: the outside world, number one, is a reflection of our inner world. And number two is ultimately, there is nothing outside of us. There's nothing outside of us. So we can allow ourselves to get carried away by all these emotions, and we feel like we're literally being bombarded by them. So when we feel these emotions, we have a choice. We can react to them, automatically identify with them, and that'll just sort of create a deeper feeling of sinking. Whereas if we bring some awareness to those feelings and to the heaviness, That awareness alone, and understanding that, a lot of this is coming from the collective, but we also have to realize, some of this is also from within ourselves, our own egos, as they're going through this ego death. So having that awareness of what's going on can offer us some relief, could offer us some perspective, because without that perspective, because all of this is spiritual, let's just cut to the chase. The physical world, physical reality is truly spiritual in nature when you see it from the eye of inner stillness through 5D consciousness. So nothing is separate from us, and everything that we see within and without is actually spiritual in nature, and it's all connected. So the more we can come to peace with that and understand that, the more we can begin to bring presence to our moments and not so much resist what we're feeling, but be a space for it. That way it can be transmuted, because what we resist, we've heard that phrase, what we resist persists. But when we can sit with something and just allow it to be, just by observing it, we can allow it to pass and pass through us. And then ultimately, when I say this word die, what that means is transformation, really. You're letting something go so you can now step into a new moment, a new you, because moment by moment, we are literally shifting into parallel realities. It's just being aware of that. So a lot of us are also feeling stuck. So we're feeling stuck because it seems like every day is the same thing. It's like that movie, where things are just repeated over and over again. You know which one I'm talking about. So if we can just realize that every moment is a new moment, and that we can choose differently despite what we're feeling, despite what we're seeing, because it's the inner world that creates the outer.
Really early on at the beginning of COVID, just when news came out of what it was that they wanted to predict and identify and kind of catapult us into, there was a feeling of absolute despair, heaviness and despair that I was feeling. And I remember at the time, I just sat with it for a moment in a state of just feeling bewildered by it all. Like, how can this be happening? and even though I wasn't in a state of calm, I heard very clearly, look for the spiritual context, look for the spiritual context. And it was around that time when we started to, gear our episodes more towards a spiritual understanding, the metaphysical, to better understand what it is that we're moving through and what it is that we're experiencing. And that definitely has given us a feeling of greater resolve and deeper understanding of what it is that we're navigating through. But there are moments like, we've gone through fires in Maui, there's wars going on different parts of the world, there's inability to access food, there's all of this stuff, and it just feels like it's growing, because now, all across Canada, there's, as obviously being on a different part of Canada than we are, there's all sorts of stuff happening, and we're not even able to necessarily be able to see one another because of the prevalence of censorship that the government has laid on the citizens. How do we navigate from day to day if we feel like the world outside has become so unpredictable and chaotic and unreliable? What do we do as far as even implementing, I don't know, a process or something that allows us to really come home to something that makes sense in a world that just seems so meaningless and chaotic right now?
That's a great question. Two things came immediately that we need to really remember. We need to remember our power because of who we are connected to the all that is, whether you want to call it source or God. And number two, we need to remember that we are freedom in and of itself. We are expressions of freedom. The highest self, whether you call it God, source, source energy, the universe, is so unconditional, has given us freedom because it is freedom in and of itself. It would never attempt to control us. It would never attempt to lay restrictions upon us. That is the free will we have. So anything that contradicts that, anything that attempts to take that power away from us, our sovereignty, we need to see it as something external, something that truly has no authority over us unless we relinquish our authority by complying, for example. So, how we navigate this is we really need to, number one, remember the power that there is in thought and in words. The words that come out from us, whether we're complaining or whether we're appreciating with gratitude, those shift our realities. And when you're deeply in the stillness state, that present moment awareness, you actually can experience those shifts. They're actually quite palpable and tangible. But until that moment happens for the collective, we need to, when we see something that we don't agree with, when we see something that doesn't resonate with us, speak the opposite. Think and speak and imagine the world that you want to see, and see it as already being done now, not a future event, but that it's here now, because everything that is possible, every potential is already available to us in the quantum field. So we all signed up for this, and we signed up to be here during this very massive shift in collective consciousness. So it's easy to get carried away and react to the outside world. And we can either continue to react to the outside world, or we can respond. Reacting is that conditioning that we've been taught since we were children, to just react with emotion, fear, anger. But we can approach it in a different way. When there's something that doesn't resonate with us, we can choose to respond. And number one is this: when we hear these things coming out of these politicians or these officials, we can see it as, we're not going to give you any of our power, so I'm not going to react to you. And I'm not going to give you my energy, because I know how powerful my vital energy is. So I'm not going to react to you. And then I'm going to take it a step further, and I'm going to speak into reality that which I desire. So if we're talking about a new earth is, first of all, a remembrance of who we are from within first, and then having that express outwardly. So if you know who you are relative to source, relative to God, relative to the universe, and you hear something that does not resonate with you, you need to speak that which you desire to experience. You need to call forth that which you desire to experience, knowing that it's already done and knowing that a way has been made. And this is the cultivation of faith and trust. Now, people will say, well, I have no faith, or I have no trust, or how do I even begin to? And quite simply, if you haven't had the faith or trust that you really want, you can briefly look back in your life and think of the times that you've gone through some sticky situations and a way has been made. And if you can do that, you'll quickly begin to remember that, you know what, there has always been a way. It's just that I wanted the way here and now. And that's that control that we've been conditioned to have. When we can't control something, we tend to want to react and tend to want to lash out. And it's usually out of fear, that fear of loss. So if we can remember to let go and trust and have faith, and then speak into existence that which we desire, and cultivate that faith and trust, that's the shifting, that's the move into 5D. And you can get to a point where you embody who you are spiritually so much that you actually are transcendent of faith and trust, and now you're simply operating on knowing.
I love that, Julio. I find like in this process, everybody's kind of being confronted by their own individual fears that are popping up. And you said a lot of this ties with loss, and I would totally agree. I think any of the fears that pop up are sort of this loss. And when I really look at it, it's a loss to this conditioned mind of false sense of perceptions and all of these things that that we think are us for the most part. But but one of the ones that came up for me, and it's like all these fears come up that are all these little things like in the nooks and crannies of the house, that are just sort of popping back up again to kind of take a final look at, I think, before they leave. That's what the feeling is like, but they're intense. Like this morning or last night or whenever it was, for me, it was the feeling, this heavy feeling of what if I'm not able to provide for my kids in the way that I feel like I need to be able to provide for them, which I think is a really foundational one for a lot of men with families. What, from your perspective, what's going on? Why are these fears surfacing like that? And then how do we actually work with them when they come up to help us see the illusory nature of them and then let them just kind of dissipate? What are they coming up for even?
So the reason they're coming up is because we're actually becoming more aware of them. So as we become more aware of the limitations of the fears, the subconscious fears that have been sitting there for years, even decades, these, we can call them triggers. The reason they're there is because they're unresolved and haven't been healed and they haven't been laid to rest. We need to let these limiting beliefs and these fears die. When I say die, I mean let go. That's the ego death. We've been hearing a lot of ego death. It's simply letting go and not being attached. So it's that practice of non-attachment. So the way we navigate these fears as they arise, see, people get caught up in, you become enlightened and then you're awake and that's it. It's a moment by moment process. It's a moment by moment process of letting the ego die and then being reborn into the next moment. So as these fears arise, we have a choice. We can choose to react to them and thereby energizing them, perpetuating them. So it's the past coming to the surface. If we react, we then catapult it into the future, and then the cycle continues. And that's what kept me stuck for several years, and that's what keeps the collective stuck. The way we manage that or begin to shift is as those arise, as that fear of not being able to provide arises, we can choose to give it automatic belief, or we can choose to observe it. So if we choose to observe it, we're coming from a space of greater awareness in the sense that this is the past rising up, and the past can only give me what it is. So tigers can only give birth to tigers. Fear can only give you fear. There is no coming to peace with fear in the sense that it's going to evolve or change, because it is what it is. It is the darkness, and that's its purpose. Its sole purpose is to spark an awakening. Now, whether that happens slowly or spontaneously, that depends on how hot our desire is to shift. So as the fear arises, when we choose to observe it instead of reacting, we're now bringing awareness into the situation. So now we're not giving it that vital energy. We're now not allowing our vital energy to be wasted upon fear. And then what we do then is and it can become so, we can become so trained to do this. It can take a few weeks. We can train ourselves to then automatically challenge the thought. And when I say challenge the thought, I mean is this: I'm able, for example, with that particular fear, I'm able to provide now and always for my family. And I'm not saying I wish I am. It's not saying I hope I am. I am now. I am now. So whenever we are challenging negative thoughts. So another example, if the thought arises, I'm feeling stuck, I'm always stuck, I can't get ahead, you can approach it in a general sense. So you observe that fear, and then the positive thought is, I'm already moving forward, and then let go, and then let go. We want to see, oftentimes we want to see results in the here and now. They are happening instantly in the quantum field. But we have this, for now, this illusion of time and space. But even that, on a collective level, is crumbling. So we're going to see actually our manifestations begin to come a lot sooner, more faster than we even think. So the way to respond to fear is to starve it of your energy, starve it of your emotion, and become practicing the art of observing and the art of being non-attached. Because the ego in and of itself, the thinking mind, is attachment. So we need to have some insight into what it is. So understanding that in and of itself, it is attachment. In and of itself, it is the darkness. In and of itself, it is fear. So we essentially have to face ourselves. When I say face ourselves, we're actually facing the illusory self, the part of us that isn't real. It's temporary and temporal relative to the unchanging dimension of inner stillness.
So what I'm picturing, Jiulio, when you're saying that, it's almost as if, and I would love to hear what you'd say around this, but it's almost as if this time, that which was never us, but we've accepted it to be, is actually moving out of us. And there's a struggle happening because it wants to stay within our physicality as the host, but as it's pulling away, it's trying to hook in whatever which way it can. Thereby these feelings of fear, of despair, or what have you, are coming up. But it's still hooking in whatever which way it can. And as these emotions come up, if we're able to kind of stop, observe, and recognize that those hooks that are grabbing a hold of our insides do not belong to us, or are not of us, we can actually then easily allow the hooks to unhook, so that that energy can move out completely. That's the picture that I'm getting as you're speaking in this way. Is that accurate? And what is it about this time that is affording us this experience? What is it about this time that is kind of pushing that energy out in such a strong way for us to be able to feel it so vividly?
That was, number one, beautifully said. And what I'll say is, we're coming to the end of a cycle. So we all chose this coming into here, into this realm. We chose to forget. And the ego is not wanting to let go of its control over us, because it has hijacked our consciousness. If I describe it as anything, I would say it's alien relative to who we are. And it's made us alien to our highest self. It's made us become strangers to that and identify with this thinking mind. Now, here is sort of the shift that takes place when we become aware of the ego and we begin to starve it of our vital energy. We can essentially cast it out. Now, what happens is it shifts from being a tormentor to a reminder to shift back into the now, and a reminder to reawaken. So it actually becomes a gift in contrast when one is awakened, or if we use the phrase enlightened. So before the shift, it is that tormentor. We identify with it, we react to it, and it can only, if we can make peace with this, it will only ever offer us what it is. It is unable to evolve, because relative to inner stillness, the reality of inner stillness, the ego is the dreaming state. It's a dream. And when we wake up from a nightmare, what do we say usually? We say, thank God that wasn't real. So humanity right now is going through a collective awakening from the dream that has actually become a nightmare, and that is ego consciousness, the thinking mind. And the next shift for humanity is into that dimension of inner stillness, 5D consciousness. It's important for me to state this. 5D consciousness, new earth, is already here and now. It's your inner being. It's that unchanging inner being, that state that doesn't change. It is no mind. It is silent. We just have to move closer inward, shift, as we bring awareness, shift towards it, and make that conscious contact with that eternal, unconditional love, that unfailing essence that is us. As we allow, so one has to fall, in a sense, the ego, for the resurrection or the rising of our true potential of the soul. But again, this is what's important is people think, well, what happens next? Well, now what happens next is you begin to create your life consciously. You let go of the suffering. You become the highest and greatest version of yourself, ever expanding, because enlightenment is only the beginning. So this is why this is happening right now. The cycle is coming to an end. The illusion of separation is coming to an end. As we were talking earlier, we're able to now really pick up on other people's vibes and frequencies. Distance is an illusion. And even if we just innocently, this is very important, innocently place our attention on a loved one and they're suffering, we're instantly going to become what they're feeling. These are the secrets. These are the insights that have been kept from us. And unless we become aware of them and conscious of them, then we're not able to move forward in an empowered way and realize really we're none of this, that everything that is crumbling is all that we aren't. It was just a temporary dream of separation.
That's so true. I feel like that's exactly what came up for me this morning, because I know my attention went right to my dad, and my dad's actually going into the hospital to have a procedure, and which I know kind of stirs up a lot of worries for him. And he's also, my aunt and uncle who recently just lost their house in the fires in Kelowna are staying with him. So I know there's a lot of emotion and a lot of stuff there. And my thoughts went right to there, and it was just felt kind of like a heavy blanket that just hit. And so I absolutely know what that feels like when you bring your attention to someone. So then from that point, then when you bring your attention, then through my conscious awareness that that's not mine, I can then project my own field. I can project my own sort of state of consciousness. And then at the same point, let that actually go. It's almost like, I think of it like creating a prayer or a field within myself that then I can actually share with that person rather than that one taking me over.
That's exactly it. So if we understand that fear, it really, and I can't hit this home hard enough, fear is essentially like a virus. And I actually talk about that in the healing frequency. So fear literally will jump from person to person, regardless of distance, because we're all connected. All minds are joined because there's only one of us here ultimately. So wherever we place our attention is wherever we create our reality in that moment. You can get to a point though where you can actually look at someone, and instead of tune into and become hijacked by their field or energy, you can simply look at them, observe them, see what's going on, and then even place your positive intentions for that being, for that person. So this is the reality we're waking up to, is that we're actually all connected. This is all energy. The physical world is actually spiritual in nature, and we need to come to the realization that either circumstances matter or it's our vibrational field that matters. So in 3D consciousness, we have been conditioned to react to circumstances, to everything outside of us, giving circumstances our power. But even circumstances are only such because we've labeled them good or bad. So even circumstances are in our minds. So circumstances, a situation, for example, someone is living in an apartment and they want to be in a home, that has no meaning. That situation has no meaning except the meaning we give it. We can see that as a temporary pit stop to the journey of being a homeowner, for example, or someone can see it as I'm always going to be here. I can't get forward. I can't. And you see how one branching thought. So all it takes is one thought, one negative thought, to then branch out into several limiting beliefs. That's all it takes. So we need to not so much focus on the circumstance. We need to go within and cut off the supply to the source of the fear, the source of feeling stuck. And it always goes back to the thinking mind, to the ego, because that is the alien that has hijacked our consciousness, making us feel like we're strangers to each other, strangers to source energy. But the only thing alien is this idea of separation that has separated us from each other and from source. And this is why the world is in the position it's in right now. But even at this point, all things are possible. And it's going to take this heaviness to really create that shift into the dimension of inner stillness, come into the silence, the strength, the safety of our inner being. It's an inside journey. And when you reconnect with that consciously, you realize the outside world is only being painted by our awareness.
Mhm. Well, and as you talk about circumstances, it's like often, well, what actually precedes circumstances is the conscious field that we are in. And all we see is what our circumstances are, and we're trying to make sense of that. But ultimately, it's it's the field that sort of dictates what those circumstances are going to be.
Exactly. So we can begin to impact the focus that people usually do is they focus on the circumstance and they keep butting their heads for months, years, decades, focusing on what is instead of going inward and creating from the field. And again, it's that result, wanting to see results instantly and here and now, where it's that cultivation of faith and trust that's required to give us that peace that we desire, and understand that we've always, if we really look at it, a way has always been made, and a way is always sort of manifested. It's a lot of times, even in my own life personally, out of nowhere, when I thought a way wasn't available. But it's that letting go. The ego in and of itself is attachment. It's wanting to control, and as long as we identify with that, there's our suffering. And enlightenment is just the end of suffering. So what I mean by that is you can still experience suffering, only now you're not identified with it. So suffering can come and it reminds you to reawaken, and immediately dies in your consciousness. That's how fast the shifts can make when you are embodying spirituality, when you're embodying who you are. There's no weeks or months of experiencing the heaviness. The thought arises, you deal with it in a conscious way, you respond and allow it to die in your consciousness, move forward. Next.
That's very useful, Jiulio. I feel like what you're relaying allows one to step very quickly out of victimhood and really observe one's reality. And even if things are happening there that are not conducive to our
Or challenging, or very real in this reality that we're going through,
then we can actually really tune into, well, what would be conducive to health, what would be conducive to creating more joy, what would be, and then creating that. And I really think that this is exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about creating new earth. It's becoming so conscious and so aware and so awakened within the the fullness of who we are, that we step into that fullness and say, this is a desired future. This is a desired now. And really tuning into that as we observe what is around us in a way that we're actually seeing what is falling down and using it as a catalyst for really tapping into what we truly desire to be like, to feel like, and to manifest in our world.
And it's also coming in a way of like the catalyst so that we're seeing it so clearly. And then that seems to be accompanied with an inner power of like, I'm done with that. And now I actually am ready to really put something new into the world. It's like done. I see it really clearly. And now it's like there's this oomph coming inside of people where they're just, it's like, no, this time we're changing. We're doing something different now, whether that's with finances, whether that's with school systems, whether that's with upbringing with our kids, whatever it's going to be, with health, all of these things. But I just feel like there's this power coming into people to actually like, let's actually do it.
And it's almost, it feels like, you know, when we've heard about or spoken about that dragon energy, that fire, it's like, you know, we step into despair and helplessness, but then after a certain point, and maybe it's through the observation of what's happening as far as the suffering that we're witnessing all around us and within us and throughout the world, there is this dragon self that then steps through, and it's that energy that then catapults us into the, okay, what am I going to do about it now? How am I going to step into the fullness of that energy and create that which I truly want?
That's exactly what's happening. So it's sort of, in one sense, forcing us to remember who we are. Because if we're comfortable in our pain, if we're comfortable in our unconsciousness, why seek change? Human beings, we're just wired that way. We don't. Things have to get louder and louder. The experiences become louder and louder, and that's to shake us and to wake us up that it's our vibrational frequency, it's our outlook, it's our thoughts, it's our words, our lack or cultivation of faith and trust. So either way, positive or negative, that manifests in our destiny and our reality. So this is the inner turmoil, we'll call it, that people are experiencing right now. Because on one hand, you have this dying ego consciousness on an individual and collective level that's trying to hang on. The controllers are desperately trying to hang on. They've realized that a huge amount of people, no matter what they try to bring forth, just not going to believe it. And that's how we need to approach the individual ego. The individual ego is like, look at me, let me give you some more fear. And this is what I need to really, really express right now. You know, the people have talked about addictions, and you know, there's different addictions. The ultimate addiction is the addiction to fear. The ultimate addiction is the ego consciousness in and of itself, because what it has done is it has hijacked the individual consciousness without the person even knowing. Without the person even knowing. So it hijacks the consciousness, and then using our literally unlimited power to call forth and create reality, it has hijacked it, and for many of us manifested a life that really ultimately isn't desired, but from a spiritual vantage point is necessary for that shift in consciousness.
Jiulio, I was having a conversation with you when we met in person a few months ago that came into play yesterday. We went to a mall in town to get some documents updated. And when I usually go into malls or places where there's lots of people, there's a feeling of overwhelm and almost a feeling of a little bit of displacement, disassociation is the feeling. Like there's so many feelings and sensations that I almost step out a little bit. But I recognized that was happening. And at that instance, I thought of you and the conversation that we had. And instead of stepping out and losing my sense of self, I felt that was what was taking place. So there's the witnessing of what was happening. And then I stepped in, and what you said is, what if you actually brought your full energy and the energy of source in with you to the space that you're moving into, and so that energy then becomes something that is going to be of benefit to whatever space that I step into. And that's exactly what I did, and it was such a powerful shift of, again, what it felt like is going from this from the energy of a victim, like this is being done to me with all this energy that is overwhelming me, to now I'm stepping into the fullness of who and what I am and sharing that into spaces where I feel like that would be of most benefit. And that shift was such a tangible, powerful thing that I experienced yesterday.
That's a powerful state to be in. And when you're in that state, it's not the environment that's impacting you now, it's you impacting the environment. When you are fully embodied in that, the other energies that are around you, so other people's thoughts, emotions, fears, they're actually repelled. They're trying to get away because there's nothing to feed off of. Fear needs fear. Unconditional love, strength, presence, very indigestible. Fear can't manage it, so it's repelled by it. That's why you can walk into a room, and if you're anchored in the presence, in knowing who you are, people pick up on that as well, because your chakras are all coming online and the light is emanating from you, and the darkness cannot feed off that. It actually is moved by that. So I'm happy to hear that, and I'm happy that you shared that, because it's a wonderful reminder how just shifting our state can have such an impact. And that's just not in your local environment, but it creates ripples really in a collective.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that's exactly what we're talking about,
Yeah.
isn't it? Like, I feel like on all levels, that's really what we're talking about, where we're anchored in who we are and what we are and how we serve in this world, and sharing that on all levels and in every moment of the day. And as different things kind of act as catalysts, there's this sense of then urgency of like, okay, now, to be and embody that in the now.
Well, and like when you were saying, Julio, about don't believe it. To me, that's a really powerful statement, and that has ripples too. So it's almost like because everybody's with all these fears that are coming up when we're slowing down and taking a look at them and see the falsity in it too. It's no different than what's going on everywhere. So if stuff is going on and everybody's kind of starting to go, something doesn't seem right about that. There's no way that's accurate. That's not the whole story. If we can do that with what we're seeing outside, whether that's on the news or circumstantial that we're seeing through social media or whatever it's going to be, if we can then turn around and do the same thing that's coming up with us individually on a regular basis when these same fears keep popping up, and sort of go, no, there's something about that doesn't feel right. There's more to the story. That's not so accurate. If we can do that in the same way that we are starting to see it everywhere else, that's a really powerful place to be. And I think that creates ripples for other people to start to do that as well.
Absolutely, massively, and I'm happy you mentioned that, Jason. Just to touch upon that even a little bit more, is when we realize that these people who pretend to be in authority have also had their consciousness hijacked, then we can shift the blame. That you're doing this to me, whereas they're in the same boat, in the sense they're serving their soul purpose, their soul contract to assist in the shift in humanity. So from 5D perspective, believe it or not, there are no villains and victims. It's simply consciousness awaking itself up. But from a 3D perspective, it's easy to become incredibly angry and think that they're doing this to us. When we sit in that and align with that, it's very easy to become depressed, feel powerless, and feel like we're at the whim of, again, these outside forces. When the truth is, it's this realm has had its individual collective consciousness hijacked many, many thousands of years ago. We all agreed upon this to experience that separation from each other, from source energy, to feel limitation. So when we come from that awareness and that perspective, you could actually come from a space of compassion that's available to us, but then also that all it is sort of like a tape player replaying itself, because they can only offer what they are. So it's fear, the attempt of control. They're so desperate for control. They know they've absolutely lost it. At times, I honestly just burst into laughter when I hear certain news reports, because you just see it for what it is, and that it's just trying to hang on desperately. But right now, we are right there, that critical mass for that shift in consciousness. So this is actually, we can see this as a very horrible time or as a very exciting time. It all depends on our state of awareness. So a couple of things to remember and to cultivate again, you know, really want to hit these home, is the faith, the trust, remembering our power, and that operating through non-attachment. Because if you notice, many of our fears are attachments and the fear of loss in one way or another. So if we can face those consciously, you know, as they arise, as these triggers come up, then we can begin the process of healing and becoming more whole. So the negative thoughts is what has us feeling separate from source. It's this movement, these emotions. And as they're healed and laid to rest, we begin to become quieter, more at peace. And then there's that opportunity, you know, source only needs, God only needs that one little desire, but that just one moment where a twinkling of an eye can take place, and that's the activation of the third eye. And then all bets are off, all things become possible, and then you're really about to step into your power.
Mhm. Jiulio, I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about the course that you're putting together, the Spirituality 101, and even why call it Spirituality 101?
That's a great question. So the reason I call it Spirituality 101 is, for the most part, a lot of spirituality has been hijacked. It's been hijacked by people truly who have not activated and made that shift. I'm going to be very clear and very blunt. Have not activated and shifted and experienced that ego death, where you're now coming from source. So the wisdom, clarity, and understanding that flows to me and through me is not of this world. My teachings are not of this world. And that is what has happened. So there are still teachings coming through that have been watered down. And because of that, because these approaches have not really made any difference in people's lives, is because the people trying to teach it are not embodying it moment by moment by moment. So the insights and the clarity that I'm going to be offering in this course starts with the conditioned mind, because if I can even highlight the conditioning as I have throughout this podcast, if I can highlight how we've been conditioned and our consciousness has been hijacked, that alone can spark an awakening, a shifting consciousness. So once we have an understanding of how we've been conditioned, we can then begin to become aware of, okay, so if we're not the conditioned or thinking mind, what am I? And that's the second part of it, is embodying and becoming aware of who we are beyond the thinking mind. And then once we know who we are and the potential in that knowingness, see, I'm not about belief and I'm not about theory. I never was. I have no interest. My desire was to directly experience and to have tangible results. And that's what I'm going to be offering in this course. And then moving forward is, okay, so now we realize we have all these spiritual faculties. How do we bring them to life? How do we allow them to express themselves? Because I'm going to tell you this, when you're living in the moment and you're in that non-resistant state, things happen to you and for you, often spontaneously. And that a lot of that has happened even with my my psychic abilities and the insights and clarity. When I've needed something or had to know something, it comes faster than lightning. It comes at the speed of thought. And then once you know who you are, then can you know where you are. And that new earth is here and now. It's a parallel dimension. It's the dimension of inner stillness. And when you embody that, you will approach life empowered, fearless. And I'm speaking from someone who, between the ages of 19 and 33, experienced intense and profound suffering, the likes of which I almost cannot put into words. The anxiety, the energy sensitivity that I had to the 3D thinking mind was unspeakable almost. And I endured it. That amount of suffering is not necessary. It's a testament to the strength of the soul, but that amount of suffering is not necessary. And we can begin to consciously approach the thinking mind and begin to embody who we are to make that shift into 5D or spiritual embodiment a lot smoother and shave a lot of time off your spiritual journey. For a lot of people, it's that feeling stuck in 4D. And 4D is that bouncing between 3D and 5D, where you know some things, you're putting some things into practice, but you still are not experiencing the highest self moment by moment and living to your fullest potential. So that's what I'm going to be offering in Spirituality 101.
I love it, Jiulio.
Jiulio, it was a few months back where I sent you a text because I had this profound experience, and knowing I was in the kitchen and I was just washing dishes actually, and I had a moment of pause, and all of a sudden I realized that all the questions that I ever had about reality, the greater reality, the truth of who we are, I realized the futility of it. I realized that my mind stepped into a different realm, time and place. I couldn't, like, I'm trying to put words to it now, but I remember at that moment, it was a state of purity, clarity, no questions, just an absolute knowing. And I kind of started to step out of it, because then it was the labeling of, oh, this is what Jiulio was talking about when he talked about inner stillness. This is the feeling of it. This is the womb within which all knowledge and all wisdom and all gnosis stems from. And I was really excited at that moment, because I think I got a taste of what it is that you speak of over and over and over again. And there's so much, like as you were speaking of the power of words earlier, I feel like we know and believe that wholeheartedly, because, and this is why we hold these episodes, because we understand the power of word, the power of conversation, in the seeds that it's planting, in the creation that it's bringing about in our reality and in people's lives as they listen in and tune in as well. And at that moment, when I had that experience of inner stillness, I recognized then that this is what you've been speaking of this whole time. And I really commend you for actually putting words to that which is unspeakable. Like you can't label that state of beingness.
Thank you for sharing that. It's a state of being that ultimately you're trying to use form to describe formlessness. Imagine trying, because it's the direct communion and experience of living moment by moment with Source or God. I can't put it into clearer words that the dimension of inner stillness is the mind of Source. And when you are anchored in that, and when you experience that, everything falls away, in the sense that you know, who you think you are, and the attachments we have. And it's not so much replaced, is you realize your oneness with everything, and that ultimately you really never lose anything. It's only that fear of loss that can call it forth or create it. And that when you're in that dimension of inner stillness and you realize that, you know, you're not resisting anything, you now have to bring awareness that your will in that moment, when you're not resisting, is one with source. And when your will can become one with that of source, you become unstoppable. You become unstoppable, and miracles begin to manifest, the likes of which one can only imagine, because now you're not operating through limitation, you're operating through 5D consciousness, you're embodying it. You are the magic in and of itself, because you realize there's only one. There's only one. And if you understand that and experience that, you then realize that everything in the visible realm, everything that you see and the unseen are one, and it's all spirit. It's all conscious. There's an aliveness to it. So when you have that experience, you know, it is like you said, Tia, it can become tangible when you embody it, but really the words are so limiting because you're trying to describe the indescribable. To say it is, you know, from a spiritual point of view, moment by moment ecstasy is even limiting, because you're in such a state that anything unlike it, anything unlike unconditional love, which in this realm we know nothing of, we know about conditional love. The closest thing that comes to it is the love a mother has for her children. So we're talking about a love that is so pure, and it in and of itself is the force of creation. It's unconditional love that has made all of this possible. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Jiulio, when people have gone through this process with you, what's the potential for them? How does their life change? How do they live their lives differently from this new awareness?
That's a great question. So they shift from, for example, if they were experiencing the feeling of being a victim, if they were experiencing that they were at the mercy of circumstances, if they were suffering at the hands of the ego in terms of depression or anxiety, those come as past and future. When one is, and I can speak of this because I was stuck there for over 13 years. So the past, when left unchecked and energized, week after week, month after month, becomes depressive. It becomes a depressive state. And then that energy, because the ego, this is its nature, is to then project into the future, which is masked as anxiety, uncertainty, doubt, self doubt. That's how it perpetuates itself. It has convinced human beings that that is the reality, past and future. Whereas coming through this program, you're going to realize the eternal moment of now. And you're going to realize and understand that the past only arrived in the present and the future only arrives now. So when you come from that anchored, empowered state, you begin to see the thinking mind, anxieties, worries, those heavy emotions for what they are, the past and the future. So now you're able to rise up in consciousness, you're able to rise up and be empowered, and now you're no longer stuck. So when you're no longer stuck, and I'm talking about energetically, when you're no longer stuck, you're now able to move forward. And now when you understand who you are and you realize that everything is energy and everything is about vibration, frequency, the power of words, the power of thoughts, you're able to now align with your highest timeline while letting go of the power that comes through non-attachment. So now you're able to approach relationships in a more empowered way. If you've been single for a long time and your desire is to attract the perfect partner. That starts with you. That starts with the individual becoming the greatest version of themselves, healing themselves, realizing that they need nothing or no one outside of them to complete them. That a relationship, and a lot of relationships are coming to this, the ones that are very surface, they're crumbling, is because there's no depth to them. So now, through this empowered state, you're sharing your completeness. You're not looking to be made complete. And that's wonderful, because now your happiness is in your own hands, not in the others. So there are so many empowering facets to this. The other one is you become aware, of the mind body spirit connection. And having gone through my own health scare, you realize that every cell is listening to you. And now you, with that awareness, you end up cleaning up, with that awareness, your inner dialogue and the way you speak and the way you carry, what energy you carry, because you realize that, there's a subtle body, there's a spiritual aspect that connects the soul to the physical body, and within that are energy wheels, or what have been described as chakras. And now you know how to align and have those freely flow through you. True health begins within, and it starts with a spiritual awareness, and then realizing the physical body is an instrument, and that it's all one: mind, body, spirit. So you're operating literally on all cylinders. Your spiritual faculties, the power of thought, faith, trust, you learn how to cultivate those. So this is just a glimpse of the massive shifts that you can make in your life when you take the program with me. And the wonderful thing is, it's going to be live, and you're going to be able to ask questions on the fly as we go.
That part alone, I think, is so helpful to be able to actually interact and have questions, and have questions actually fielded by you during it. So it's always one of the benefits of doing any of the live courses. I know when we did the Nature Care Solution ones recently, really helpful to be able to actually have this dialogue with people as they're going through. Jiulio, as we're coming to a close here, would you be able to, almost like how we started this on our own with a bit of a prayer, I'm wondering if for everybody that's tuning in today, if we can kind of close this with a bit of a prayer too, for all of those that are going through these hard times, and going through the fears that are stepping in, and going through very real loss that's taking place at this time. A prayer just to kind of help hold all of us.
Absolutely, I'd love to. I'm just going to preface this prayer by reminding everyone that, what you desire for your life individually is what Source or God desires for you. Desire is not a bad thing. Desire is the spark of creation. Our suffering comes when we become attached to how and when the desire is going to manifest. But desire is incredibly powerful, and you really need to step into the space of knowing what you want for your life, knowing what you desire for your life, and then thinking, speaking, vibrating at that level of desire, at that frequency, knowing that it's done, and then letting go. So I'm going to share a very, very powerful, very short, but a very all-encompassing prayer. You can interchange the word God with Source, whatever feels comfortable for you, but here it is. So if you want to close your eyes and just feel these words deeply, you can think them, you can speak them, and here it goes. All that I desire and the will of God are one, and my will is God's, and God's will is done. Amen.
Thanks so much, Jiulio. I know when we first talked to you, and you had mentioned that prayer, and that one often goes through. I find that one really powerful, and I'll say it sometimes over and over again, and it starts to become, and God's will is done. Like you're bringing forth the will of God, not just your individualized will that we often use. We're stepping into this enormity.
Who's that wizard? with
Gandalf. It's
Gandalf, like
thou shalt not.
Hammering it down.
That's the feeling that it kind of comes.
And it creates this like massive ripples throughout the entire planet is kind of the visual that I get whenever I say that prayer. It's a really powerful one.
I love it because it is so all encompassing, and it's a reminder to not resist. It's a reminder that what you desire is what source desires for you, because your wills are one. Your wills are one. Anytime we're in fear, anytime we feel that inner turmoil, we are literally going against, not that you can, but energetically going against the will of source, the will of God. It's quite simple. The minute we let go of the oars and trust, let it all go. I say that energetically. So I say that like within your consciousness, let go. That is when anything and everything becomes possible. Anything that we're attached to, trust that it has attached itself to you and it has hijacked your consciousness. So practicing non-attachment, that's one of the keys to, if you want to call it the enlightened state, is not being attached to circumstances, to really anything, including negative thought, negative emotion, thoughts, because everything begins within, including our relationships. Everything is within. So you don't become a chaser, you become an allower. You allow.
That's
So
beautiful,
let's
Jiulio.
all allow new earth.
Yeah, amen to that.
Here, here.
Thank you so much, Jiulio. For everybody out there listening, these are really important conversations to have right now. I really feel like these are foundational for where we are moving towards, what's already happening right at the moment. To me, these are the support that helps to hold us and raise us up when we're going through these challenging times. Please take a moment to subscribe, to like, and to share these. This helps get these messages out to those that are looking for them. So,
Jiulio, where can people find more information about the work that you're doing?
Sure. So they can start my website, jiulioconsiglio.com, and I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and now TikTok. It's Jiulio Consiglio.
Awesome.
and we'll put some links for Jiulio's new course coming up as well. So we'll inform everybody there. You can even go to we'll put a link there and you can click on the link, and then you can even add your name to the waitlist, and we'll send you more information about it. Jiulio, always a pleasure, my brother.
Always a pleasure, guys.